Hello everybody, today we're making French bread. For this recipe you'll need your dough attachment and your stand mixer. We're going to start off with some lukewarm water here to get the yeast going. And as you can see, I didn't use the correct container the first time. You want to use a larger glass container so the yeast has room to grow, but it's 2 packets of yeast, half a teaspoon of sugar, and half a cup of warm water. And you just mix it together and you let it grow in the larger container that you can see me swapping to here. Now that we've got that straightened out, my assistant is going to get that all mixed up. Then we're going to go in with half a cup of vegetable oil, 2 cups of hot water. I just turn the tap on the hottest setting and let it run until it's as hot as I feel like it's going to get. And she's dumping the oil in now, and I'm going to come in with the hot water. And then you'll also need 3 tablespoons of sugar and 1 tablespoon of salt. I'm just drying off the measuring cup so I can use that for the flour. In with the salt and the sugar, and we let that mix a little bit while the yeast is growing. I'm going to go ahead and add 3 cups of bread flour. I use bread flour because I used to make this recipe with regular all-purpose flour and it's just not as fluffy and airy, so definitely use bread flour for this recipe. You're going to get it all mixed until it's all wet, and this also allows the yeast time to grow. Here you can see I'm taking the spatula and I'm scraping the sides just to make sure it all gets incorporated. Turn it back on. Alright, I think we're good here. You can see the yeast, make sure it's more than doubled in size. So turn your mixer off and scrape that in. I use a spatula because it's really good at scraping things clean. Alright, turn it back on slowly because it will splash if you don't. And let it mix itself all around. I like to speed it along sometimes because I have no patience. Alright, we're going back in with the 3 additional cups of bread flour. I like to slowly increase the speed, and it will usually get all of the flour incorporated without me having to go back in with another spatula. I've also learned over time, the more you let the dough knead like this with the mixer, the better it turns out in the long run. It seems to add more air and make it more fluffy, which is how I like my bread. And that's what it should look like right now. Very, very sticky, but it won't stay that way. So there it is. We've got the attachment out, setting the bowl aside. We're going to cover it with a kitchen towel. We're going to cover it for an hour. The original recipe says in 30 minutes to run the mixer again, but I just don't have the patience for that. So now I'm boiling water. It's been an hour, flouring my surface, greasing all of the dishes I'm going to use. I've decided I'm going to try 2 bread loaves and 2 pans of rolls. There's the bread. Look how pretty that is. It ended up being about 2 hours because I decided to juice some things while I was waiting, and beets, they make a pretty big mess, which is why I'm not wearing my orange sweatshirt anymore. But here I am turning the dough onto a floured surface, and the most satisfying part is this right here. It just feels so cool. So I'm going to quarter the dough, 1/4 each in the bread pans, and then I'm going to cut the other 2 quarters down into roll sized pieces, and I'm going to do 9 rolls per dish. You can see me struggling with some math here. It all worked out in the end. Doesn't have to be perfect. You can also see how much the bread has risen just sitting there on the counter. This is such a great recipe. So I'm just rolling the dough. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not going to look like perfect balls. The beauty of this recipe is when you let it sit and rise, it kind of levels out, rounds out, and it just ends up looking so pretty when it's cooked. So here's me. I have never used a bread pan before. Usually I just roll them out, roll them up, and make like Italian or French rolls out of them. But here I decided I was going to try to make sandwich type bread. Now I'm going in with 2 egg whites and a baster, and I'm just going to baste the top of all of the rolls and the bread. This gives it a really nice crust and a really pretty color. And then when it comes out of the oven anyways, I'm going to cover it in butter also, which adds to it. Just make sure you coat them all really well. Everywhere you coat is going to make it golden brown. Usually when I make these into Italian loaves, I'll slice them on top so they have that pretty little slicing once they cook. But I didn't do that this time. Alright, we're good to go. So now I'm going to take the boiling water and I'm going to put it in this saucepan, and I'm going to put this saucepan on the bottom of a cooled oven. Then I'm going to stack the bread in there in the shelves, and I'm just going to wait until they're at least doubled in size. So they're in there now, and we wait. Oh, and as you can see, they've doubled in size. So now I'm taking them out. I'm going to put them in the oven beneath, which is the red-headed stepchild of ovens, because for some reason I never use the bottom. That's why you'll see there's all kinds of stuff in it. But I'm going to put them in there while the top one preheats, just so they stay in there with the water that's still oddly hot. And then I'm going to do the rolls first once that preheats. So in they go. And I set my timer for 20 minutes, and it actually did not take that long to cook. I rotated them at the 10-minute mark because my oven cooks wonky. But as you can see, when my timer was at about 5 minutes, they were definitely done. So I took them out and I basted them in lots of butter. Butter is life. Put the loaves in. Those took about the same amount of time. And just like with the egg wash, we just cover the tops. These ended up being probably the best rolls that I have made to date, and I've been making these since COVID in 2020 when everyone decided they wanted to start learning to make bread. Here are the loaves. I think they came out pretty good, and they look completely different from where we started when they were super tiny and odd shaped. So they filled out.